As you can see, I got the heads on the block. I tried filing these dowel pins to give it some clearance, but these are hardened dowel pins, so a file wouldn't touch them. So I tried a honing stick, but that was it needed more metal removed than that was going to do. So I ended up using a Dremel tool and grinding a flat spot on the sides of the dowel pins. But that didn't help as much either. I ended up having to relieve the sides right here also. But after taking the head on and off 10 times, I got there. So now the heads fit on the block. While we're talking about heads, the guy hasn't got the crankshaft balanced yet, so we might as well look at the heads and see what they're going to need. There are lots of different 426 Hemi heads out there. Mopar heads were still available not that long ago, complete. The last version was cast by Edelbrock for Mopar. It looks like the previous Mopar head. This is the Victor Juniors, which are if they ever start shipping them again, they're the best bang for the buck. Now there's lots of used heads out there, but by the time you go through a lot of work trying to get them to be right for you, you'll have a lot of money in them. Whereas these are only around $1,700 a piece, complete, delivered to you. And UPS is so high nowadays, just shipping your heads off somewhere and bringing them back is very expensive. But when they get to shipping these again, these are the best bang for the buck. Now on a totally stock car, it's not as good because it says Edelbrock on the end and everything. It doesn't look like a stock head. You would want to use stage 5s for that. They're very stock appearing and wonderful heads. You just might have a little more in those by the time you get them done. These Edelbrock heads, it says on the box, bolt on out of the box and go. And I know several people that have done that, and they didn't have any problems. But I guess you have trust issues and you just want to know for yourself that it is good. And since they're laying here, we might as well check them out. The guides, some people say the guides are too tight. I guess that depends on the application. The Mopar guides, the Street Hemi spec on the guides was very, very loose. But nowadays, people run them tighter than that. It just depends on the application. Racers want a little more clearance to know they aren't going to have a problem. We'll check the guide clearance on these. Now, you know, if you had used heads, you'd flip them over and you'd lay a straight edge across them and you'd check to make sure they weren't warped, and you'd have somebody do a valve job and all of that. But if new heads are available, that's a good way to go. These, in the old days, the Mopar valves were a thou smaller on the exhaust because you want more clearance on the exhaust. And so you'd have to set your tool up to do the exhaust and then set your tool up to do the intake. But on the Edelbrock heads and some of the other valves that I've bought from other companies, they're the same size stems. So you just have to hone the guides to get different clearance for the intake and exhaust. These were all 310 with a 0, so we didn't have to set up the fixture but once. I set the fixture to 0 on the valve size, and so all we have to do is stick it in and check the guides themselves, and it'll read directly in the clearance. That's a thou, which some people feel is a little tight for the exhaust. That's a thou. And they'll probably all be the same because they all use the same reamer, right? Thou. And a thou. We'll check the intake side. Be a little, wouldn't be as bad on the intake. And, well, that's really more like 9/10, isn't it? But pretty close to a thou. That's pretty close to a thou. More like 9/10. Yeah, that's more like 8. So, some people would say the guides are a little tight to suit them. So, you might want to have it honed depending on who's going to put these together for you, and you know what I mean? Drag racers, people that don't want to have to worry about whether they're too tight or not, would want 1.5 thou on the exhaust and maybe 1.2 on the intake. Since we're here already, we might as well check the valve spring installed height. These heads are available in a few different configurations. Some are complete and everything's set up for you already. They also sell them bare, but I probably wouldn't do that because they don't come with a valve job if you buy them bare. And the valve job on these is absolutely beautiful. I don't know if it's any good, but it's beautiful. But the valves are specific to them really because they're 2.32, and that's not standard, and it's not a known commodity that people use. So don't buy them without the valves. Just make your life easier. And it's probably better to buy them complete. But let's check this out. You always have to use a spring cup on any aluminum head. Those are 60 thousandths thick. These springs want to be installed. I think I'm planning on using the comp 928s or 929s, and they are set up at 188. So you want to check this and make sure it's what you want for whatever spring you're going to use. I think the last set I did of these, they were perfect. So that's kind of wonderful. You know what I mean? 1.88. How are you going to gripe about that? The Edelbrocks in general, you know, are very, very nice, very high flowing. You know, these flow as much as ported heads, and that's what makes the price so reasonable. They're complete, and they flow like ported heads. They're really nice. The Stage 5s are beautiful too, but you know, you have to let somebody work those over for you, you know. And because these, as you know, I'm planning on a flat tappet, and as you know, they're all junk, and they go flat, and they want you to break them in. Yeah, right. like any street Hemi cam was ever broke in out of those 11,000 that didn't go flat. And so they say you can put take the inner springs out and break the cam in, and that'll those 928s or 929s will give you about 100 on the seat if you take the inner spring out. So I'm actually going to do that stupid crap. Okay, so this is coming out to 1.95, so that'll be fine. That you'll just have to have a 60,000 shim underneath the spring, and that won't be the end of the world. That'll take you down to 189, close enough. There are such a thing, if you, everybody's retainers that you, like let's say all the intakes were 195 and you didn't want the shims. There is different retainers that you could use, but I wouldn't do that because you don't want to be mix matching retainers on an engine. That's, you know, that might be wrong. I like the idea, but if you ever tear it down and put it back together, you could miss it. You know what I'm saying. But I might try to get you an iPhone photo of this. I tried the camera and it didn't give me a good enough shot, but I really would like you to see how beautiful the valve jobs are on these Edelbrock heads. They really look nice. But that's, so we think the heads are fine. When you put it back together, you want to use some kind of lube. You know, it's going to be a while for enough splashes on there to lubricate this. Everybody's got their own preference. Professional head people, they use this white lithium, but I just use half motor oil and half STP. Whatever you like for that. Just stick it in there and make sure that everything's lubricated, because it'll be a while before the splash gets to them. And I'll try to get you a shot of these valve jobs. So if you're going to buy the Edelbrocks, buy them at least with the valves. Then you have a valve job. If you buy them bare, you don't get a valve job, and now you got to go finding a guy to do that, and that may not be convenient to your location. But so you think the heads are good, and we're ready to go. We should talk for a minute about the Stage 5 heads. The Stage 5, everything Stage 5 makes is superb quality. Really, really nice stuff. They tell me the guy was a pattern maker in a previous life, and these are going to look the closest for anybody who has a street car and wants the car to look stock. They're also they call this a stock exhaust port, but that's actually raised about a half an inch. But I haven't had anybody that said it affected the fit of their headers in the car or anything like that. And of course, I think the raised exhaust port is better. But the pattern is all stock. This was called their replacement head. They discontinued this, but the other head that they make that you can get is not much different. But you have to have somebody complete it for you. They do the ports, and so you'll end up with ported heads, and they hone the guides. They have to do the valve job. So all of this adds up into real money. You'll end up with more money in the Stage 5s. But if you want a head that looks stock and something that you have a chance of getting your hands on, unlike the Edelbrocks right now, then you ought to be thinking about the Stage 5s. They're really nice stuff. There is one slight problem if you try to run the Edelbrock heads on a standard bore block. The problem is the Edelbrock heads use a 2.32 intake valve. And when you put them, when you're mocking things up and you put the heads on the block, the valve will only go down just a tiny little bit before it hits the block. And I know you think the end of the world has come, but it really hasn't. And the crazy reason is because 59 years ago, when they were designing this engine, they knew that in 2022 you were going to be wanting to put Edelbrock heads on your motor, and that this valve was going to hit here. So this is a 64 race Hemi head gasket, Chrysler CPD stamp and the part number. And you can't tell it really in the video, but this is not round. This is relieved so you can run a bigger intake valve. This hole is 60 thousandths bigger this way than it is this way. Now, so what are we going to do? Well, you put the head gasket on, and then you'll see the relief there. You got the bore. This is a larger bore block, so I can't show you, but you'll see the relief right there. And you take a magic marker and you mark that area right there. Then you get some type of tool. You don't have to have, this is a Sun, but you don't have to have something fancy. You can use a piece of 3/8 rod and a drill with some 3/8 fuel line on it, wrap some sandpaper around it, and you just sand on that. If you put this in a drill, it sands it out very quickly. Now you don't want to go all the way back to the gasket. You want to leave, say, 15 thousandths. You don't want to go all the way back to the gasket. But you can use this and relieve that, and don't go at this angle. Don't get down into where the rings are. You know what I'm saying. You're just going to relieve that block right there, and then the valve will clear. Now, in reality, on aluminum heads, I would rather use the 65 head gasket, which is copper because 65s had aluminum heads. But I thought I had a lifetime supply of these when I bought them, but somehow I've used them all. But copper is mo better, I think, more accepted on aluminum heads. If you know anybody that's got any 65 head gaskets, I want some. But that's all there is to it. Just relieve that area, then the valve will open all the way up, and the world will be a better place to live.